The British aristocracy isn't known for its progressive views or flamboyant theatrics, but one noble broke the mould. In this episode of Well I Never, we explore the extravagant and short life of Henry Cyril Paget, 5th Marquess of Anglesey. In his brief time as Marquess, Paget lived to fulfil his every whim, from elaborate gender-bending costumes to rose-scented car exhausts. Every bit of his life was ornate, whimsical and beguiling to his peers. In the complicated ladder of British nobility, Marquess seems to be one of the lesser known about titles of the peerage. The first Marquess in England was Robert de Vere, 9th Earl of Oxford, who was appointed the Marquess of Dublin by King Richard II of England in 1385. From there, a long string of marquesses was created across the British Empire. A marquess ranked only lower than the actual royal family, directly below a duke. To make things more confusing, dukes can also claim marquess as a subsidiary title. This is just to say that a marquess was quite important in British society. When you think of nobility, you may conjure scenes straight out of Downton Abbey. Tweed suits, tiaras, sprawling estates and stuffy butlers. You wouldn't be wrong. The British aristocracy has always maintained specific standards for a good reason. Peerages are handed down from the monarch themselves, known as the Fount of Honour. Recipients of hereditary peerages, which were handed down through generations, were especially mindful of ensuring their heirs were equipped to uphold the honour of the title. The 4th Marquess of Anglesey was no exception. Henry Cyril Paget was the oldest son of the 4th Marquess and his second wife, Blanche Mary Boyd, born on the 16th of June 1875. Despite some rather shocking rumours that the 4th Marquess was not his biological father, Henry received all the benefits and training a soon-to-be noble should. His father was the Vice Admiral of the Coast in the British Navy, and his mother died when he was only a toddler. He grew up in splendour at his family's lavish 30,000-acre estate. He received a private education at home with only an elderly nanny and his pet as companions. His father, a difficult character by his own admission, gave Henry little attention. Still, none of this was unusual for a young man in the upper echelons of British society, and he seemed to be on the typical trajectory. He attended Eton College, and following the conclusion of his education, he was commissioned as a lieutenant in the 2nd Volunteer Battalion in the Royal Welsh Fusiliers. On January the 20th, 1898, he married his cousin, Lillian Florence Maud Chetwynd. Lillian was a striking young woman with green eyes and flowing auburn hair. She looked as if she had stepped right out of a Renaissance painting. The two made a beautiful pair. Paget himself was known for taking great care of his appearance and used makeup to cover any flaws on his delicate countenance. They also appeared to share an interest in beautiful things. During their honeymoon in Paris, the pair purchased an entire display in the jeweller's window. Beside these few small eccentricities, Paget was doing everything expected of an heir to a marquess. But when his father died later that same year, it was as if young Paget shed his false skin and revealed to the world exactly who he really was. With his father's passing, Paget inherited his title, becoming the 5th Marquess of Anglesey, and the family's estate, which stretched across Staffordshire, Dorset, Anglesey and Derbyshire, netted him a cool annual income of £110,000, the equivalent of about £13 million today. Not bad for a young man of 23. With a seemingly endless supply of cash at hand, Paget saw no need to continue with what had clearly been a charade. Within months, his wife had left him, citing non-consummation as the reason for the annulment. She said the only time she had even gotten naked in front of her husband was so he could drape her in jewels from top to bottom to admire the effect. and while Lady Anglesey decided to withdraw her request, the two remained estranged. Free from marriage, Paget threw himself wholeheartedly at his true loves, theatre and spending money. He began with some remodelling. He renamed the family estate from Plasnewydd to Anglesey Castle and gutted the family chapel to be replaced by a 150-seat theatre. Next, he hired a professional theatre company and began showing pantomimes and plays for free in the Gaiety Theatre. The productions were not for him to watch from the audience, as he would take centre stage himself. Each performance featured Paget adorned in exquisite costumes and performing his signature butterfly dance. He quickly earned the nickname the Dancing Marquess in newspaper gossip columns. Paget did not look anything like one would expect of a marquess at the turn of the 20th century. Indeed, the photographs of him could just as easily be of a Ziggy Stardust-esque 70s rocker, thick moustache, long hair and jewel-encrusted robes. According to actor and writer Cyril Davis, who wrote and performed an acclaimed musical based on the life of Paget, he didn't understand the concept of costume jewellery. He thought it all had to be real. By some estimates, a single diamond-encrusted costume worn by Paget in the pantomime Aladdin was worth at least £10,000 at the time, an eye-watering £1 million today. Davy said that costume was worth more than the house, and it was just left in a dressing room, and somebody nicked it, and he had another one made. If Paget had lived today, his style would likely be defined as gender fluid. Photographs show him posing in everything from bespoke suits to flowing gowns. These photographs survive because they were handed out to his audience on postcards, a souvenir to remind them of the extraordinary show the Marquess had just put on. Eventually, Paget decided his productions should be shared with a broader crowd than his small theatre at Anglesey Castle allowed, and took his show on the road. Along with a company and crew of 50 and lorry loads of luggage, props and costumes, the Marquess toured Britain and Europe. At this point, despite his massive yearly income, Paget was deeply in debt, and a theft in London didn't help. While staying at the Walshingham House Hotel to attend a performance of Sherlock Holmes, Paget's valet took advantage of his employer's night out at the theatre to steal jewellery valued at over £50,000, about £2 million in current times. Some of the items, including a pearl valued at over £1 million, were recovered in Paris a year later by a British detective disguised as Paget. Despite the debt and theft that would have caused many to hold their cash a little bit closer, Paget seemed to show no signs of slowing his spending. He spent millions on horses, furs and yachts. He had his limousine retrofitted to resemble a luxury Pullman railway carriage, complete with revolving armchairs, tables, cabinets and solid silver fittings. It cost him £2,500, around £250,000 in today's currency. His other vehicles had also been modified to spray rose-scented perfume from the exhaust. When not in one of his lavish vehicles, he was known to stroll through Mayfair with a snow-white poodle under his arm, one of the dozens of tiny dogs he had replaced the family's hunting hounds with. Feeling sporty, he had a jacket made specifically for playing ping pong, and wanting it to be green, he had it encrusted with real emeralds. It was as if Paget didn't understand that anything but complete extravagance was an option. Paget's outrageous spending on luxury goods, combined with his penchant for dressing as a woman on stage and not minding a bit that his beautiful wife left him, led to many speculating that he was homosexual. However, there is no evidence that the Marquess had lovers of any gender. Historian Viv Gardner wrote that Paget was a classic narcissist. The only person he could love and make love to was himself. Others believe, regardless of his sex life, Paget holds a place in LGBTQIA plus history for his gender identity. He was certainly far more comfortable publicly playing with gender norms than any other member of the aristocracy. And he put on touring productions of an Oscar Wilde play just a few years after Wilde himself was jailed for gross indecency. Whatever he was at his core, Paget was unafraid of showing himself to the world precisely as he pleased. Paget's spending continued unabated until he was forced to stop. By the summer of 1904, he had run out of cash and amassed debts totaling 60 million in today's money. Bankruptcy proceedings were started and trustees were appointed to run his estates. The winter of 1904 brought 40 days of auctions to sell off all the Marquess's items to repay his debts. The auctions allowed an authentic peek into the excessive life of the 5th Marquess of Anglesey. One day was set aside to sell his massive collection of dogs, another for 900 lots of silk-lined suits and fur coats. The parade of extravagance marched on. Treasure chests full of pearls, gold cigarette cases studded with rubies, the world's largest collection of walking sticks, their handles encrusted with jewels, hundreds of pairs of shoes in leather, crocodile skin and suede. In all, 17,000 lots were auctioned. In less than 6 years, the Marquess had spent a fortune, and now the treasures he had amassed were also gone. Debts paid and creditors mollified, Henry Paget departed for a new life in France on an allowance of £2,000 a year. While the Marquess undoubtedly found this a meagre sum, what amounts to roughly £210,000 today was plenty for a comfortable life. Paget seemed determined to return to a life of luxury, and in 1905 newspapers declared he had invented a new gambling system to take on the casinos in Monte Carlo and hoped to break the bank. He took up residence in Monte Carlo's Hotel Royal, where he died of tuberculosis the following year at the age of 29. With his death, the title and estate passed to his cousin, Charles Paget. Charles and the rest of the family were furious with Henry's decisions, and understandably so. He had squandered the equivalent of $500 million in 6 short years. It was also somewhat understandable that the new Marquess immediately turned the Gaiety Theatre back into a chapel and restored the centuries-old name to the family estate. But what I feel is genuinely saddening is that he and his family also set about to destroy every last reminder of Henry Cyril Paget. They burned all his journals and letters. They destroyed his remaining personal effects, and they scrubbed him from discussion and did their best to pretend he had never existed at all. Today, nearly every trace that Paget was the 5th Marquess of Anglesey has disappeared. One of the few remaining relics from his life, a diamond tiara called the Anglesey tiara, was recently sold at auction. Despite being commissioned by Paget, the piece was kept in the family and worn by the 7th Marchioness, Dame Shirley Paget, at the coronation of the Queen in 1953. It is testament to Henry Paget's extravagance, with diamond-set scrolls, clusters and pear-shaped motifs. A graduated row of more than 100 carats of old European and mine-cut diamonds can be detached to form a Riviere necklace. While no doubt today the piece is sitting in a collector's jewel room somewhere in Europe, I dare say it's best remembered around Henry Cyril Paget's head as he performed a butterfly dance in flowing robes of white, jewels glimmering on every inch of the dancing Marquess. Thank you for watching. Sadly, we're not quite as wealthy as the 5th Marquess, so if you'd like to help support the show and get a few bonus and uncut episodes, please check out our Patreon page by following the link in the description. Right then, take care, and I'll see you next time with another story to make you say, well, I never.